And we are live.
Woo!
Hey, I'm completely stoked to have Akira the Don. Now, I discovered Akira the Don a while back, and he's kind of moved in and out of my consciousness over the past few years. And people who are viewers are borrowing some of his music to make, fan memes and things like that, which we're not putting out there. I do want to talk about that later. And I just really admire what you do. I love the fact that you not only are creating music, you said screw it and you create a whole genre. How's it going today?
It's a beautiful day to be alive here at the peak of recorded human civilization.com. I'm in an Airbnb in Playa del Carmen in Mexico, which I have converted into a recording studio. I can hear myself coming back from there. See, these newbie errors. I've converted into a recording studio, a video creation situation with this guy back here as one of the main aspects, and now a live streaming hub. And I was literally up till silly o'clock this morning setting up streaming capability so I can not only talk, I will now, as of tomorrow, be able to perform epic live concerts right from here, this Airbnb in Playa del Carmen. Because we live in the future and you can do that shit. It's crazy. You can be like run out of your home and have to like leave the country you live in on the drop of a dime, and you can take your core studio shit with you and keep it moving. I've made a whole album in the past 2 weeks in Airbnbs, along with about 6 music videos and a number of singles. It's incredible what we can do here in the future.
That's insane. And what blows my mind is you're setting all this up in an Airbnb, which is a temporary location.
Yes.
So that's dedication. Yes. You're like, oh, hey, if I'm going to be here more than a couple days, then I'm going to be moving in. Everything.
I got to be able to function, you know. I mean, part of my whole thing is this get in the zone, refuse to leave experiment. So I can't allow anything for me to fall out the zone.
Right.
And the number one thing that makes you fall out the zone is stopping doing whatever it is you're in the zone doing. So if I stop making music for a day, it could fuck up the whole thing. You dig? So I have to keep doing what I'm doing, and it has to be at this specific kind of a level. Otherwise, it will all fall apart. So, the first thing I did when I got to Mexico was set up a studio and then go on a 3-day quest to find this CRT so I could carry on making visual stuff in the manner to which I've been developing this aesthetic,
That's cool that you're using a CRT. It's almost like you're doing lo-fi video as well as audio.
I am, yeah. Well, it's a combination of everything with as futuristic technology I can possibly get my hands on, and then the best of what we already built, right? Mm-hmm. So with the videos I'm making right now, I'm using a combination of very, very futuristic, just released rotoscoping technology, and then circuit bending and old ass televisions and capturing that, And yeah, same with the music, I'd be using like a 70-year-old recording of somebody talking about something, or in the case of the song that's coming out tomorrow, 2,000-year-old text.
Marcus? More Marcus Aurelius?
Epictetus.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, are you the voice on Marcus?
Yes.
And okay. So you get a chance to get your voice out there doing the voiceover. How is that different for you versus mixing somebody else's?
Well, it's what I started doing. I was a rapper primarily from 2000 to 2013. I was primarily focusing on rapping, and I was making my own beats, but I was primarily focusing on rapping. And the only reason I'm doing what I'm doing now is because I got to a point within the rapping journey wherein the record I wanted to make, I realized I was not yet wise enough to make. And I had to go and have some more experiences in the world, and I had to become a father and do all this stuff before I could make the record that I knew I needed to make. And then in a period of just making instrumental music and sort of studying and traveling the world and becoming a father, I realized that I could just be integrating the voices of people who'd been thinking about these specific subjects for like 30 years and making records with those. I didn't have to go out. Here's the thing, right? Hip hop, one of the brilliant things about hip hop, one of the things that for me makes hip hop almost the ultimate art form, is you don't need to be able to play every stringed instrument and conduct an orchestra and be Jimi Hendrix on guitar and all these things to have a record of that quality. You can sample all those things. You can say, you can sample a drum kit from the 60s, integrate a string part from 1973, bring in a bass player who lives across the other side of the world, add drums that were, turbo engineered last week, so on and so forth. You can bring together the greatest of every aspect that is the right aspect to create that specific thing. And you can do that on your own,
That's it. I'm going to ask probably the first incredibly dumb question of the day, but it's one that bugs me because I don't completely understand. And that's the term DJ.
Uh-huh.
And I always, I grew up, I'm a bit older than you, but, DJs were somebody who was on the radio or in a club and they go one record and then they play another record and they mix them together and try to have things go there. But then there's also the DJ that's like Deadmau5, an EDM.
Well, he's a producer.
Oh.
So that's just the thing that happened with EDM, where the definition of DJ and producer got mixed together. Because oftentimes with EDM, and EDM was just electronic dance music, and that was the American take on what had been going on in Europe since the late 80s, with rave culture and all that kind of thing, right? And what happened was that the people playing the records were often also the people making the records. So the producer and DJ thing got mixed up. Also, what happened as we were able to start making records with computers, that meant people could do what could previously only be done in $1 million studio in their bedroom, which meant that, actual DJs could start experimenting with making music. And then they could start making really good music. You could get, stuff that sounds like it was recorded in $1 million studio made on a laptop in your bedroom. So DJs were therefore very well positioned to actually make music that worked in that context, because they're out there playing it. If you're a DJ, right, you're out there playing records, what works in a way that someone who's just in the studio and never goes outdoors actually has no idea about. If you're in the clubs and you're like, oh, this plus this equals this, and if I drop this thing, then girls do that, and if I drop this, then guys start headbutting each other, and so on and so forth. You can take that knowledge and apply that to the records that you create. And if you're doing dance music or EDM, that means that those DJs were going to be able to make better or records that were more effective in that arena.
Are you ever surprised?
That makes sense.
When you're in the club, are you ever surprised? Like you drop something and then you get a reaction that you're like, whoa, I never saw that reaction coming.
Yeah, I'm always surprised, and that's because I always make sure that I do like 30%, at least 30%, like new shit. So DJs will have a lot of DJs. I remember, they get into a comfort zone of, oh, I know this works, so I'll just do this. I'll play these two songs, and I'll play whatever's in the top 10 or whatever, right? And it's the same as anything, this whole zone inhabitation type situation. If you get too comfortable, you fall out of the zone. And that magical place doesn't exist. The magical zone place is a place where you're very competent, but you could very easily fuck up at any given minute and everything could collapse. So when you're DJing, you should be doing unexpected things, and you should be having those experiences of, holy cow, I didn't know that would happen. Because if you're not having those things, it means that you're playing it too safe, and it means that it's impossible to get that next level of transcendence for your audience, because that top level of transcendence in that experience is only possible if you're operating out in that zone of the unknown.
That makes sense. Is that like great guitarists who are doing solos and you can just see that they're straining so hard to stay in there that they're just like a one hair from screwing the whole thing up.
Exactly.
That tension is kind of the magic.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
And you keep doing that compounds. And if you keep occupying that space, you get deeper into that space and you get access to more of the magical deep shit. It's as if it's a sort of domain of muses that you can break into and start stealing their shit, right? But then you keep doing it and you think you're stealing their shit and you think you're getting away with something. But they're up there like, oh, here comes that guy. We've left this stuff out for that guy. And if they keep seeing you do that, at some point they're going to go, do you know what? This guy's serious. Let's give him some of the real shit. Let's give him one of the. Let's crack open one of the magical boxes. This Jimi Hendrix guy, he just keeps coming in here. He just keeps breaking in to the fifth dimension. Like, let's crack out one of these special, glowing orb things and see what he does with it. That's how you get to that space. That's why the whole idea of of waiting for your muse or whatever is such a poisonous, retarded ideology, because it's not like muses are sitting around and like looking for someone really cool to bless. You know what I mean?
I don't know, unless you're on Instagram. No.
But it's like, you got to keep going in there and showing up and proving yourself worthy of these gifts if you want to look at it in that way. And that's one way of looking at it that's functional.
Well, that's cool. And okay, you've talked about how you used to be so far ahead of the curve that you kept falling short because it was like, oh, you're doing something and the rest of the world is kind of going, okay, that's weird. And then 10 years later, they would catch up to it. But by DJing, it's helped you stay grounded and recognize that, okay, this is working, that's not working. Have you read Derek Thompson's Hitmakers by chance?
No.
The basic premise of the book, he's a writer for Atlantic, is essentially that a hit is something novel or is something familiar and something novel.
Mm-hmm.
And from what you were describing, it sounds like your DJ experience is letting you get that something familiar that is comfortable for people, but then being able to tweak it and kind of poke at it a little bit to take it to that next level.
Yeah.
Kind of leading them ahead. Is that a fair analogy? Yeah,
that's a fair analogy. And it's practical. Pretty much in anything you're doing involving culture, you're going to want to be doing that. The KLF wrote a book called The Manual about 30 years ago, describing how to make a #1 hit. And this was in like 1988 or something. They made, as the Time Lords, they had a #1 record with a song called Doctoring the TARDIS, where they basically mashed up the ba-doo-ba-da-dum glitter beat as utilized by 70s glam rock types, including famously Gary Glitter and the Sweet and people, with the Doctor Who theme, with contemporary house music production. So they took the sort of nostalgic, a couple of nostalgic things that don't normally exist in the same sphere, put those together, then added the contemporary, and voila, you have the recipe for something that is novel and also familiar and also evokes that nostalgia. So it hits on all these different emotional levels and works. And they used that formula multiple times and had multiple massive records, despite being random weirdos with no, they tried different, I don't know if you know the KLF, but it's like, they weren't like Madonna. They weren't like public facing pop star types. They kept changing their image. They're the guys who burnt £1 million.
Oh, so they're almost performance artists after a fashion.
Yes, exactly. They were kind of just interested, I think, in how things worked. And they were like, oh, if we do this, then this happens. And if we do it again, it happens again. What if we do this? And da-da-da. And they got to the point where they were massive and they got, they had like a #1 album and all this, which they deleted. They deleted their album because they were like, well, we're too big now. This is silly. And they got a Brit Award. So they go to the Brit Awards and they were famous as a pop dance band. So they turned up with a death metal group called Extreme Noise Terror and performed like a death metal version of their massive song, dressed all in black with big trench coats and automatic weapons, and shot blanks into the front row of the audience who all shat themselves. Then they delivered a sheep carcass to the after show party, and then announced that they'd split up. And then a little while later, they phoned up a load of music journalists and said, oh, we've got something going on. Come with us. It's going to be fun. And they took them and then they said, here, they gave them all like a stack of £100 notes each and said, right, put these on this fire, and made these journalists be basically complicit in the burning of £1 million, which was all the money they had. That then reduced them back to the level of regular humans, and they never made another record.
Insanity. Now, on that note, you were a journalist, music journalist, right? As kind of an entree into the field.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, at that point, there wasn't internet when I was a kid. And I used to read music magazines quite religiously. I wanted to know how things worked. And it seemed to me that, well, it was a case of who you knew in a way for a lot of it, right? So I was like, all right, if I become a music journalist, then I'll be in that world. I'll know people, and then I'll be able to get my music heard by people and get it cracking. And that's what I did. And that worked because, that worked.
Well, is that your mindset? Do you like to reverse engineer procedures?
I mean, it's the quickest way of doing something. You could sort of bump around in the dark until you get something, or you could go aim at something and then reverse engineer a strategy for reaching that aim, or even better, reverse engineer systems that will carry you to that aim and then Then you just lie back like a guy crowd surfing, essentially, and get to your destination. I mean, obviously you have to do the work, but you know what I mean.
Oh yeah. No, I mean, obviously you put a lot of thought into that. Now you've talked about in other interviews, and I thought it was fascinating about your deal with Interscope and how essentially they kind of buried it. And it reminded me of a story. I have regular body language experts and people like that on the channel, and one of them is Scott Rouse, who's he's actually a Grammy nominated producer out of Nashville, and he used to go in with bands, not only as a producer, but because he did body language, and he would go into the room, and he would look in the room for the band. They'd be talking about the deal, and he would be able to tell the band, no, they're full of shit. And it was kind of a cool thing because as he goes, yeah, if you said you had the one there, he says, oh man, dude, yeah, you're the man. No, you're screwed. That's not the right one. And he described something where artists would be picked up by a label because they had another artist already on the label that was very similar. So they wanted to pick up the new artist. Then they would plant it on the shelf and prevent the competition from their current roster.
Correct. Or they would do there was a lot of that. So people just getting signed just to stop other people having them and just to stop it existing. Or they do the old Mountain Dew 7-Up thing.
What's that?
Is it Mountain Dew and 7-Up or Mountain Dew and Sprite? It's Mountain Dew and Sprite that's owned by the same company, but they're positioned in competition with each other. So that the one company basically has the whole market on fake lemonade. Yeah. Okay. So there's that thing that happens as well. It's like all these things, the joy beer of wars. Being, what's that? Yeah.
They had beer wars here. Anheuser-Busch and, it was InBev owns like Busch, Miller, Coors, and like all the main brands. And then they do shelf space. And if they worry about too much encroachment, then they'll release a new size. Like all of a sudden there's an 18-pack. So now you have to pack the shelf space to cover that 18-pack.
Exactly. And these are weird concerns that like will stop being applicable as we move away from physicality. It's interesting because you don't have those concerns on an internet. But this is the thing. So when I was, the few years I spent as a music journalist, one of the joys of that was all my suspicions about journalism were proven to be true. And I had all these suspicions, and they were all proven to be true. And it's a wonderful thing when you're doing something and then you read in a magazine or a newspaper or something, someone writing about the thing that you know intimately. So being in the music industry and doing music after then doing music journalism, then reading the accounts and knowing intimately how utterly full of shit they are. Then you just say, okay, so that's everything. So everything is like that because these things I know intimately. I know they're lying, and I've also seen these people operating, and I understand full well the interaction between publicity, PR offices. You write the nice thing about this shit new indie band, and we'll let you go see Oasis type shit that exists in everything. So you've got this kind of like that level of corruption. Then you've got utter despicable corruption. Then you have like the thing that happened to me wherein they're like, all right, we've got you signed we're not putting out a record with these lyrics, so you need to change these lyrics. That literally happens, that they literally say, you're not talking about this. We're not putting out a record on Interscope that's supposedly rebel, right? I remember when I went in there, and he's like, yeah, we're the home of Tupac and Guns N' Roses because they had Geffen and all this. And he's like, you're going to be like, you're going to do to rap what the Beatles did to rock, and then when it comes down to it, it's like, we ain't putting out records that talk about that shit. Thank you very much. And so that whole thing was a beautiful education because all my suspicions about the way the world worked were confirmed at a very early point. So then I didn't have to waste decades, as a lot of people do, not knowing. You have all these people who have various levels of so-called awakening, and it's like, oh, okay, I'm 45, and maybe politicians are corrupt. It's nice to get that shit out of the way early, because all the things that you suspect as a child. And then they kind of hammer that out of you. No, silly childish thing. You were right. It's like the childish suspicions are usually correct with regards to things of that nature.
Makes sense. And have you heard of Gelman amnesia?
No.
That'd be funny. One for you to sample. Michael Crichton coined it.
Is it Michael Crichton? It's Michael Crichton, Jurassic Park writer.
Yes.
That's so weird that you mentioned him. I listened to 3 hours of him talking last night, walking around Mexico in the pouring rain.
He's somebody you might want to consider.
Yeah, I was literally listening to 3 hours of him and put aside about an hour and a half of stuff that I might turn into an album. And it's weird that you mentioned that, because I literally, until last night, I'd never listened to him speak. I've watched movies based on his work. I was a big fan of Westworld when I was a kid, the first movie. Anyway, sorry, that's interesting. So
he cared. I haven't found any audio of his talking about it, and I wish it was out there. Gelman, Murray Gelman is a friend of his, or was. He's dead now, and Nobel Prize winning physicist. But Michael Crichton's talking about this phenomenon very similar to what you were describing as a journalist. You work in the industry, so anytime they write something about your industry, you know they're full of shit. Because you're there, you know, behind the scenes. But we all have that. We know, we have knowledge about a particular thing, and then we read and we go, that's bullshit.
Everybody.
But then you read something else and you're like, hey, that's messed up. And you just believe it right down the line. And that's the amnesia, is that, you know what? If they screw up on what you do know, then odds are pretty heavy that they're screwing up on everything else too.
Exactly. The trick is, I guess, I mean, is how one gets a majority of people to accept that truth and operate with that as a fundamental basis upon which to navigate the world. I have had this for a long time personally, but I spend an awful lot of time. I feel it's a waste of time trying to convince otherwise really smart people. You see a lot of these really smart people, yet they believe what they read in the Independent or whatever, or it's bizarre. They take at face value proclamations of so-called authorities when they know within the realm of their own domain of specific knowledge how corrupt, how wrong, how everything we've just spoken about. It's very strange. How do we get this as a fundamental basis?
Tradition. I mean, as a species, we do cling to our cultures, our values, our traditions. And that authoritative source has been drummed into our head. I don't care how hard you fight it. Even you're pretty wise. You'll find yourself, I bet, sometimes going, oh yeah, and then having to second guess yourself. Wait a minute.
Well, here's the thing, because it's a principle of persuasion is the authority thing. And if someone is authoritative in one area, we naturally just assume they are in others. They put Bill Nye in a doctor's coat, so you think he's an actual doctor, and then he can talk to you about fucking anything, and you believe it. He'll tell you about comic books, and you'll think you believe him. It's bizarre. But this this seems to be a thing that's just hardwired into us. And then you kind of go, well, this is something we were programmed with so that we could be better servants to the alien master race that created us. Or why is it that we have this thing? And is there a way for us to break this on a mass level? Is there a way of untwisting this thing? Because it's the thing that causes some of the most problems.
Honestly, I think it's getting worse because, in my personal opinion, we've been just suffering a year-long Milgram experiment.
Yo, real shit.
Or even longer, really. And it's very hard to break out of it because the power has swung very far. And I actually want to go into that because you've been pretty optimistic in a lot of your interviews, but I'm like, yeah, a lot of this is pre-COVID too, or not really deep into it. So I'd like to know how that 7-year cycle is going with you. And
everything is happening bang on cue with that. Shouts out to everyone in the chat room, by the way. What's up, Joey Cashy? What up, Cap Strong? What up, WMI? What up, Fool Killer? What up, Ivor? What up, R Colorado? Shouts out to the whole chat. God bless. Yeah, 7 years cultural cycle where one swings from essentially punk rock, nihilist, dark, earthbound to psychedelic, space-looking, sci-fi, crazy. I've been predicting that we would swing back into psychedelic in 2021 for a long time, having been observing this since KLF days. And here we are. Suddenly it's alien disclosure and all this high weirdness, and everything seems to be falling apart, and public trust is collapsing after the utter death and despair of last year. When I predicted, by the way, years back, you could see me predicting that in the summer of 2020, there will be rioting in the streets and everyone will be dressed in black and setting fire to shit. And that's what we had. But here we are in 2021 now, and it's suddenly like aliens and woo and decriminalizing psychedelics and just general unraveling and your auntie asking you really weird questions and shit of that nature. So it's all going according to what I foresaw. As far as what people often ask me, they go, Akira the Don, you're so positive and optimistic, and you talk about this being the peak of recorded human civilization. How can you possibly say that when all this horrible shit is happening? And you go, there was always this horrible shit happening. It's just you can see a lot of it now, and that's amazing. All of this stuff was already happening. You were already being programmed and controlled and lied to and murdered or whatever the heck it was. That a lot of people didn't know. Now it's really obvious to see what's going on. The cap is visible for everybody. It's a beautiful, beautiful thing. And as far as,
but then that's also disturbing, right?
What's
also
that?
Disturbing. It's disturbing at the same time, because
Crichton spoke about this.
Things that are revealed wide open, right? Like, okay, people say that a certain thing happened, and by the way, we're on YouTube, so that means I have to dance on a pin and always use coded words and things like that.
That's wonderful. It makes you creative. It's a wonderful thing. When we were kids, we had slang because we didn't want to know what the grown-ups were saying, right? It's still the same thing.
Yes, thank you, YouTube.
Shout out to Tom Hanks all day.
Oh, ouch. Well, yeah, you must have. I've already gotten this one limited on ads. So anyway, where was I going with this?
I don't know.
We're seeing things happen. Like, I'll just say Hunter's laptop. Hunter Biden had the laptop, right?
There's always someone.
It's right out there. Everything's out there. All the knowledge in the world, and there's a big fat yes. So
yeah.
So that's kind of, some of it is very disturbing because, like you're saying, we can see it now. But sometimes I go, you can see all these machinations. You see it all going down. You see they're lying to your face, and then you vote for them again.
Yeah. But that's good to know, because there was always this thing. I remember when I was younger than that, people would be like, oh, if only people would know, if only we could just get the information out, then things would change. I always be like, no, I don't know about that. On that level, you know what I mean? It's like there's a certain percentage of people that are always going to download whatever the software update is and roll with that. And there's always a certain amount of people who are going to not, and so on and so forth. And that we can now see very, very clearly, doesn't matter what information people are given with or whatever, if it goes against their perceived self-image and whatever team they think they're supposed to be on or whatever belief they think they're supposed to have this week, they'll just reject it. They'll literally hallucinate an entirely false reality rather than go against their own perceived self-image. And that's a thing we know about humans and always have. But now we can see it. We can see it very, very plainly. Like, it's incredible. And I think that's also a good thing, because we need to be operating realistically.
Yeah, this cognitive dissonance is what you're describing. Scott Adams goes on about it quite a bit. Have you read Robert Cialdini?
Yeah, exactly. It's a fundamental of Cialdini's outlining of persuasion principles. Right. As with the appeal to authority thing, you have the idea that, what's the thing in that where he talks about the car salesman, the amazing car salesman he found? He's like, if you get someone to say that they like something, they're a lot more likely to buy it if you can just convince them. Yeah. So therefore, I had this realization with the purpose of social media. One of the purposes of social media. If I say I don't smoke anymore, I quit smoking, I'm a lot more likely to actually quit smoking because I've made a public propagation. I'm going to want to adhere to that. I don't want to be seen in public going against my perceived self-image, right? So you make a public proclamation, you're way more likely to stick to that, despite evidence changing. Say it suddenly comes out that tobacco is actually really good for you. If I've been anti-smoker guy, it's going to be very difficult for me to change, despite the evidence having changed, right? And so public proclamations will put you into a place that you will not voluntarily move from, despite what information comes out. And social media is nothing but a public proclamation extraction machine. You log onto it, and it encourages you to make a public proclamation about anything. As soon as it's happened, you're shamed for not having an opinion on something that's just happened, even though you don't know what's just happened. So it's therefore very easy to just create a narrative instantly and have everybody make a public proclamation surrounding that narrative that they will then not deviate from when the actual truth of the thing comes out in 7 hours or something. So
right, because of the shame, sure.
Yeah, well, not just the shame, just the perceived self-image that they do not wish to go against. It's like just this, they're not even thinking about it. It's all, yeah, you know, exactly.
Yeah, no, the Cialdini study where the with the appointment slips, where instead of writing out the appointment, they would hand them the slip that was blank and say, can you go ahead and write that down for me? And just the act of writing out their own appointment time made the appointments go up like 20+%.
Correct.
So, yeah, I absolutely. Now, we were talking about how do you change things. I would argue that you are doing that along with some other artists. Like, I don't know if you're familiar with Tom McDonald at all.
Yes, I'm aware of Tom McDonald. Familiar.
Okay, he's
big rapper,
right-wing rapper. I don't know if you'd call him that, but I mean, he's
a culture war rapper. Well,
yeah.
He's a rapper who currently, as his avenue of content of his lyrics, has been exploring the culture war stuff for the past couple of years. Mm-hmm. And there was a massive gap in the market for that. Huge gap in the market for someone to do that. And someone to do that at the level of professionalism and interest and cultural. A lot of times when people are doing things like that, they're maybe not the coolest people. It comes off as a bit cringe or whatever, where he rides it very well. You know, sure. He does very good work in that regard.
You have to admit that it's a pretty odd situation. And this is where everything is flipped upside down, because he's writing protest songs, just like 5 Times August, who I had on actually last week. He's writing protest songs, and the protest songs are what you are doing in essence by quoting the evil man Jordan Peterson, who is one of the most unpopular people on the planet to any kind of mainstream, but he's helping save countless young people's lives, especially young men.
And I have people writing to me every week who say, Akira the Don, I got into your music through your, or maybe it's people who were into it because they liked me in the first place, or I got into it through your Alan Watts records, or whatever it is. And they say, and then I heard the Peterson stuff, and I thought I was supposed to not like that man. I thought that man was supposed to be evil, but the records are amazing, and they've changed my life. And, you know, it's literally like a weekly basis, someone will be writing to me saying that they helped a friend not commit suicide or get off drugs or something like that. And oftentimes it's people who ideologically were not supposed to be exposed to those ideas. People who have been sort of programmed that taking responsibility for one's own actions or whatever is not the thing to do for decades, are suddenly discovering the joys of radical self-responsibility, and their lives are improving very, very rapidly as a result, and they find it amazing, and then their friends and their family and so on and so forth. So yeah, I'm doing that, and that's one of the things I figured I could do. Sometimes I did the rap thing, you know, and sometimes when you're telling a person, here's a persuasion principle I was teaching my son. People like to come to their own conclusions. People like to think their ideas are their own. You sitting there pointing a finger at someone and being very, very preachy. Hello, Hercules. That rarely works. That rarely gets across, right? I can use other people's voices. Hang on a sec. What's up, Herky? Son's just come in. What is it? If you want something, come over and say hi.
I don't want anything.
You don't want anything. You just wanted to come in and interrupt my flow and pull a little weird little face at me. Yo. Oh my goodness. He likes live streams, but he likes it when it's like my live stream, because he can come and do a dance and someone will send him a super chat. You know, he gets really excited about when he worked out that worked. You just saw something go off in his mind. What were we talking about? Yeah, okay. So I could sit here going, you know, when certain rappers, they can just come across as preachy. I spent years listening to conscious rap. I like Dead Prez, all that, right? But like, if you're not in that area and you play a record, it's some guy telling you, do this thing, that you just go fuck yourself. But if you can sneak in some smart people talking about some ideas with music, and that draws you in, and, you know, and then other ideas are introduced. Exactly. And if you present it in the context of a story, which is something I've been doing quite specifically, then you can make ideas palatable to people that otherwise would never have been receptive to them. And sometimes it'll take time. People write to me all the time. I've been listening to this Alan Watts record of yours for 3 years, Akira the Don. I literally just worked out what he was talking about. I just wasn't really paying attention to what he was saying. I liked the music and the sound of the voice. but now I've just worked out what he meant and it's blown my mind. And sometimes it'll take people there. So.
Which is interesting. I have to ask you this one. I just thought of it. Haven't gotten through all the David Goggins. I noticed though that looked like it was your longest album. And if it is that because you were afraid that he would hunt you down and shame you for quitting too early?
The Goggins record is long, and it had to be long because it had to pack a lot into it. And the Goggins record, it was necessary that there was. People have this funny idea about Goggins that he's just this lunatic who does a lot of push-ups or whatever. It was very important with Goggins to get the whole story into that record so people understood not just what he was telling them to do, but why it worked for him. You know, what he was saying. That's why it was important. It was important that people understood where that came from, the background of it, what he transcended, where he started, where he ended up, all that type of thing. So I did that album. That album was a bit of an epic because I felt it necessary to include all that information in the one record. Sometimes you can do it over a bunch of records and it doesn't matter. In that instance, I felt it needed to be contained in the one.
Have you read Living with the Seal? That's
no, I haven't. No, I haven't.
See, I knew of him before
I was aware of that.
Out there. He was just Seal.
Yeah, he was that guy.
Fantastic. About that, it's funny book.
I think I first heard him mentioned in the context of that. The guy who wrote that book, I remember hearing him talking about this, and that led me into looking at some videos, then finding the guy. You're like, holy cow! If you've never experienced David Goggins, it's a wonderful thing to experience, especially at Christmas time. You know, just Goggins is like one of these things. You say Goggins 3 times in a mirror. I mean, I've never tried it personally, just in case it worked, because I wouldn't want it to work. You know, he just shows up, like shows you his foot or something.
Well, he was put on this earth for people who thought Jocko Willink was a little intense.
You know what I mean? It's great because he's this archetype. You know, they're all the people that I utilize in context of Meaningwave have quite specific archetypes. And Goggins, you know, people, if you were looking at it from a kind of distance, you'd be like, oh, Goggins and Jocko, they both occupy the war or whatever category. It's like, no. No, Goggins is the monk. You know, he's the warrior monk. You know what I mean? He's that warrior monk. Like Jocko's like a leader of men and a philosopher. Yeah. He's almost like some kind of younger, like Marcus Aurelius who went out and shot people or something. I don't know how much war Marcus Aurelius was involved in, you know. But he's more one of those type motherfuckers. He's like a general type guy. But Goggins, he's that warrior monk, you know. He's the guy who's in the anime movie, like roaming the land with the sword and all this type of shit. Like, suffering.
Yeah, I can see that. He's one person you never want to be. Just, you know, look, it's like, hey, it's all yours, man. You can have it. 100%. Own that real estate. Congrats.
Yeah.
Now
you said saying that, like, he says that music is cheating.
Yeah.
Yeah, he's like, music, because a load of people listen to our music for reasons of motivation. And I always say, you know, you don't need motivation when you got meaning. You know, but his whole thing is like, yeah, like you put on a record to help you get through your push-ups or whatever, that's cheating because that's giving you extra energy that's coming from somewhere that's not inside yourself. But even he, to do his 24-hour push-up challenge, put the Rocky theme on a loop for half of it.
Oh, there you go.
You know what I mean? So like,
hey, you don't have standards if you don't have double standards.
Pew. That's so real. So real. Let's crack in chat. Do you talk to your chat normally, or do you just like leave them there?
Well, I let them talk, and then it depends on who it is, especially because I do a lot of panels. I haven't got a lot of questions coming in, so a lot of it is I'm like, okay, everybody's just kind of talking and commenting. But when people start coming in with the questions, and folks go ahead and put some questions in there, then I'll start bringing them up. And depending on where it is, like this is the first time I've ever interviewed you. In my show, I would have just done for a long time just an interview and not have the chat, but they are influencing me to a degree. Like I'll see something like, oh, I might want to go down that path, or oh, they seem to be drifting off. So it's a, it's kind of like DJing a live stream, I guess, of sorts.
It's very different, I find, the live stream podcast to the just recorded podcast for that reason, for the reasons you mentioned.
Yes. And I prefer, even if I'm not talking to the chat, and they're cool, they understand that. What's really fun is having like one of the panel discussions with the crazy lawyers that I have on. For some reason, I know all these lawyers, but they're all politically minded. They're all super sharp. And the type of people I love are thinkers. And that's why I wanted you on, is you're a thinker. And they're people who will be cheeky. They make jokes. They will argue, but then be laughing about it. And that's what I want. I feel like we're in a world right now where we're afraid to say anything and we're completely bottled up. And I was just listening to an interview with you talking about how a guy used to scrape every word on the internet, could predict everything, but now he couldn't because people were so locked down that.
Oh yeah, Cliff.
They're not.
Cliff High.
So
Cliff High and his webbot thing, yeah, which he was using to predict the stock market and Bitcoin prices and stuff for years, with a relatively high degree of accuracy, to the point that the crypto people were paying attention to it and making money. And then it stopped working around 2013, 2014 as people started self-censoring their language, and it didn't work anymore.
Exactly. And here you go. Puppy Shark wants to know, where do you see yourself in 10 years?
I don't do that kind of thing. I pretty much live in the moment as much as possible.
Have you found the moment and you want to ride it like a surfboard?
You can have an aim, right? You have an aim of some kind, and you reverse engineer aspects of that aim. So say you have an aim that you want to be financially free,
Sure.
You want to live by the ocean, or whatever it is. You have some aim. You want to have this degree of proficiency in this thing or whatever, and you can reverse engineer something that moves you towards that, and that's the aim. And then you put systems together to get you to the aim, and that's brilliant. But you should always make sure that you're engaging as much as possible in the actual moment. Otherwise, your life just disappears, and you didn't engage in the life. There's a song I did. Alan Watts described this pretty well, and the song is called "Life Is Not a Journey." He talks about this idea that so many people have about life being a journey, and you're supposed to go to school and then get your exams and go to a job and get this and do that. And you're always aiming at this thing, and you're always moving towards this thing. And then when you finally get there, you're old and you're like, hang the fuck on, what happened to my life? And at that point you realize, oh shit, it wasn't a thing where I was supposed to be getting somewhere or acquiring. I was supposed to be engaging. It was more of a dance, or more of a song. I was supposed to be dancing. I was supposed to be playing. I was supposed to be engaged in those moments and being there fully, So one of the things I aim at is being as engaged in the moment as possible. And that's why, and I've been this way for a long time. People used to think I was weird because I didn't look forward to stuff, but I also didn't miss stuff. And that's because I was always actively engaging in the moment as much as I could, I really loved the moment. I always did. There's almost so much going on. I used to sit on buses, just look around and try and imagine what everyone was up to and what they were going through. I used to just write songs based on that kind of thing. I used to think, how could anyone ever run out of things to write about when there's just always so much going on at any given moment,
Is that where you're going lately? You mentioned just a few minutes ago that you're really focused on storytelling now. And, starting off with Jordan Peterson, those are lectures and they're lessons and they're principles.
They were always stories.
This thing is,
that's what I liked about him. That's what I liked about Peterson. It was like him breaking down what the Bible meant, or breaking down the archetypical, what Pinocchio was all about. And Peterson's existence was a story, which I realized very early on. People were attracted to Peterson for the same reasons they were attracted to 50 Cent. And it wasn't because that 50 Cent had better records than whatever other Beanie Siegel or whatever rappers were coming out at that point. It's because his story was more captivating, more interesting. He was getting in all these dramas. People were shooting at him. People were trying to kill him. People were trying to take him out every week. 50 Cent was fascinating for that reason, and Peterson was the same way. He was getting in all these dramas. All these people were trying to take him out. These people hated him. Why did they hate him? And then you go to him, and he's got this, in the same way that this happened with 50 Cent. You go to 50 Cent at that point, and he has this massive catalog of mixtapes and just bangers, straight bangers. He had hits for days.
That's the big part. That's the real story, though, right?
And that's what Peterson had. So you go to Peterson, he had 3 years of lectures, He had just hundreds of hours of incredible lectures on whatever you were interested in. Peterson had the story, and then he had the world for you to get lost in when you looked at that story, And then as far as me utilizing Peterson in the fashion I did, I was thinking about it like the MCU. And you want to start at a point that's relatable, and you want to start at a point that's kind of grounded. You start with Iron Man. That guy's rich. He can build a suit of armor in a cave. And then you can get to Doctor Strange. You can get to Terrence McKenna. You can get to Guardians of the Galaxy. You can get to Alan Watts or whatever it is, or Robert Anton Wilson or whatever big ideas you're looking towards. You can get there, but you've got to start somewhere understandable and relatable.
Right, but now you're going into the small almost, and that's why I was asking, because Theo Von, and I really love what you've done there, but he's very different. That seems to be just a very personal story. So what was your thought and motivation behind, let's say, Theo Von?
I've been doing this from the beginning, but so you'll have a person who has some ideas that are perhaps they're issues of the mind. They might not be practical things that you could try out in daily life. Then I'll have someone who has some way of practically applying a lot of those ideas. Because it's very important. You can't just sit here thinking about it. You've got to be able to integrate these things, otherwise they're useless. And so by the time one gets to Theo Von's story, I felt was necessary and useful, particularly now, because Theo Von's story is of someone who had all these they had all these things going against them, all these potentials for disaster. And even when he did something and he dragged himself out of where he was and he used his God-given talents, he was then presented with the thing that presents so many people when they go to Los Angeles or whatever, which is a capacity to lose everything via the demons of drink and drugs and narcissism and what have you. And he transcended that, and he got through that, and he managed to hold on to his humanity. Theo Von's story is kind of like a how-to. It's very practical. It's very beautiful. It's very spiritual. Lots of things that Peterson, Watts, David Goggins have all spoken about are embodied and made real and practicable in the story of Theo Von. So
and Joey Diaz, I guess, as well, a little bit.
I love Joey Diaz. Joey Diaz is I did that one Joey Diaz song. I really want to do like about 8 Joey Diaz albums. I just need to get hold of him and get his permission, and I've yet to get hold of him.
Okay, I wanted to, let's circle on that for a little bit, because I am very interested in what you do. First, your thoughts on copyright music, copyright claims, how music should be treated, and fair use. Like you just said, you need to get a hold of Joey Diaz. So I'm guessing that you used it and put it out there under fair use to start, or did you already have his permission?
It's some weird shit. It kind of seems like none of it makes any sense. One feels that it's okay to put something on YouTube, but one feels that it would be improper to do a whole album and put it out on digital streaming platforms and distribute it in that manner. So, like YouTube, what you go to YouTube for, YouTube is there's clips and remixes and this and that and the other. It's the nature of the thing on YouTube. And no one's really making any money. Everything gets like counterclaimed and treble claimed. Most of a great deal of records of mine that I have entirely made myself have been claimed by major record labels. And there's nothing you can do about it. It's like they have nothing to do with the record. I didn't sample them. It's not their song. And they'll just claim shit. And there's nothing. It's bizarre out there. You have to start.
Claims, or
what's that?
You haven't been able to fight any of the claims, or
you fight them, and what happens is you say, I disagree. This is mine, and here's the proof that it is mine. But it's not YouTube that adjudicates. It's the person who made the claim. So they get to say if they were right or wrong. And so they say, no, I'm right. I want all the money or whatever it is. I don't know what their thought process is. And there's nothing you can do about that. At that point, you have to take it to court. And of course, that's expensive. And if I was taking people to court every time they erroneously claimed my shit on YouTube, that's all I would be doing. So you just have to.
I wonder if you're better off doing a fair use counter then.
No,
in a weird way.
That doesn't work.
You're not using it, just doing the fair use. Like, no, sorry.
It doesn't work. It doesn't work in music. They won't. I mean, it could maybe work if you took it to trial, but just in the context of the backward and forward of claims in YouTube and other things, it doesn't work. You could say fair use if you're making a video criticism, but if you're putting out a music video, it doesn't work. So anyway, whatever. That is what it is. We're at this really, really early stage in the game, and it's all very silly. We're moving towards a world which blockchain is going to be facilitating, where it all works and everything makes sense. And the original one of the, Jaron Lanier, who's one of the guys who invented VR, and he's one of the guys who was involved in the original creation of the internet, essentially. And at one point, they were working out how they were going to monetize the internet. And there was a couple of ways they could have gone. And one way was a kind of monthly subscription where everyone pays, say, $50 a month to have access to the internet, and everything you visit gets like a small piece of that $50. So if I watch your stream, a little bit of that money goes.
Spotify model.
What's that?
It's the Spotify model for the internet.
Yeah, exactly. So there was that one, or there was advertising. And they were like, could do this, and it went with advertising just because it was easier to implement at that point. All the fears people had about advertising, people had fears, and they all came true. All the problems that we have with the internet are as a result of that. So people know that now. Next internet, which is blockchain-based internet, all that's already built into it, right? If you and I do a Nifty together or something, it can just be written on the blockchain before we put it out, like this percentage goes to you, this percentage goes to me, and then it does instantly, So we don't have that right now, but that's where we're going, and that will make creation really easy, because then you'll sample. If you sample something, then the correct amount of the money will instantly go to the person you're sampling, and the right amount. Right now, if I put out a video and it's 2 hours long and it's got 8 seconds of something that Sony thinks is theirs, all the money goes to them. Right. Whereas in the future model, if there's little pieces of all these different things, little pieces of the money go to all the people who contributed, including the bass player. In the current model, the record companies snatch all the money and they do not give it to the people who made the music. By the way, don't get it twisted. Don't think that shit is getting. Think that the record amount of money that's being made, more money is being made, in music now than ever before by far. But artists are getting way less than previously. And they're very upset about this.
Always the case, though. But ironically, yes, I know there are artists that are actually re-recording their own music.
Yeah.
Just so they can sell it on a commercial or do whatever, because they don't have rights. They don't have the ASCAP or whatever the hell it is. I don't remember all of it.
It's boring and stupid, and it's just an aspect of being in this very, very early stage of the game that we're in. People always forget this. We're so early in the internet. It just got invented last week. Like, look at my beautiful, youthful face. There was no internet when I was a teenager. That's how new that shit is. That's how new it is. We're so early. Aside from the fact that in the context of like the human itself, we're so early that like we've only been rocking with electricity for like a fucking blink of a gnat's eye in a cosmic contest. So all this stuff, this will all get worked out. And I try not to spend too much of my time concerned with it, but just on a moral level, just morally, because that's how that's what I'm more interested in what's right. And I just think morally, if someone, is alive, I should consult with them before turning their beautiful words into a record. So with Theo Von, it was important to me to get Theo Von's permission, because that's his story. And yeah, he told it and he put it out there, but that doesn't give me a right to make it into a record. And well, it doesn't give me a right. I can make it as a record, but it doesn't give me a right to like put that out and so on and so forth without getting his permission if possible. So where possible, I think I'd personally like to get permission of the person. And then what you also find when you do that is that then you meet the person and they might be really nice, and you might end up like, being able to help each other out, or you might end up having some kind of relationship. As I'm in regular contact with Dr. Peterson, for example, and, with a point now where he considers it with, who did he speak to? He spoke to someone in his podcast last week, and he says, oh yeah, I work with Akira the Don, I work with this artist. And so it's now that kind of relationship. And I can hit him up and say, oh, could you record these words, and so on and so forth.
Oh, nice.
If I'd just been doing stuff without his permission for years and just hoping I'd get away with it, that would never have happened,
No, that makes sense. And also, I'm curious, because I feel like there's a responsibility that you have through curation. Yeah. Like you can shape whatever the hell they're saying. You can editorialize it to a very strong degree. And I did want to ask you how you approach it to make sure that you're either true to them or true to the message, because they may not agree. I mean, the person in the message may be a little bit different, and there's tension there too. So I'm
you put some music. I mean, you could say exactly what you just said, but if I put some ominous music under it, that would change. That would change the perception of the intent of what you were saying. So that's the thing that's a part and parcel of it, and there's no avoiding it. Now, one of the main things I'm doing is everything within my power to be as true as possible to the meaning and the intent of what's being said. But sometimes maybe I don't know that, you know, and sometimes I have to step away from things, or I have to go and do a whole bunch of extra research to make sure that my initial suspicions or what have you are correct. Because sometimes, you know, you might misinterpret something. So anyway, I do put a lot of time and work into making sure that I'm correctly transcribing, essentially. You know, the whole music is a language that communicates things that words cannot. So if I'm adding music to some words, that's going to be part of what I'm doing, is aiming at getting at what they were aiming at getting at, that the words were getting in the way of, you know. Terence McKenna talks about,
yeah, I mean, it's a hack. A horror movie, you know, you just mentioned ominous music, right? You walk in, you'd be any type of environment, you go get the right sound, boom. It's like an instant shortcut to, okay, this is ominous, bad thing's gonna happen. Done.
Exactly. So I'm supposed to feel sad right now. I'm supposed to feel happy right now. I'm supposed to feel what exactly.
So that can actually help digest. And I want to go into Eva from the chat.
So Eva.
Sorry, Eva. Is music getting pretty global due to technology, or does traveling to different places and cultures still inspire the different types of music?
It depends on the individual. There's a thing now, it used to be the case that music was very regional, and West Coast rap sounded very different to East Coast rap. And if you listen to the charts nowadays, you'd think that things seem to sound almost all the same in a weird way. Like everyone's got there's lots of reasons for this. Back in the day, you know, if you were making rap records, the drums you used, you weren't downloading packs off the internet. You had like the stuff that you chopped out of records yourself, or the stuff that you'd played, or whatever it was yourself, right? Now everyone goes on Splice and downloads the same new drum kit every week. So you have that aspect to it. Also, people live inside the internet. And if you live inside the internet, you're not even necessarily looking out the window. Like music that came out of California has a specific sound due to the nature of the place. It's this sunny thing. It has a sound. The music that came out of London had a different sound. Grime music sounded the way it did because it sounded like council estates and shit weather. You know, if you're interfacing with the world, your music will sound like the world. But if you're interfacing with the internet, it will sound like whichever world in the internet you're in. And so that's something that we're currently dealing with. And it has wonderful aspects and it has unwonderful aspects, just like everything. Just like everything. Just like a rock could be used to draw a smiley face on a cave wall, or it could be used to cave in your father's head. You know, that's everything right now. And that's where we are.
Get the key. So, yeah.
Yeah, so it answers that anyway. It's down to the individual. Some people take a great deal of inspiration from their immediate surroundings, and some people are unaware of their immediate surroundings.
Or they avoid it. They find the most comfortable area that's with people like themselves wherever they go, and they don't necessarily experience it as much.
True.
Frank Barron, why do you call yourself Akira the Don? Do you speak Welsh?
Rydw i'n siarad Cymraeg. Dwi ddim yn gallu cofio lot o Cymraeg achos dwi ddim wedi bod yn siarad Cymraeg bob dydd achos dwi ddim yn byw yn Cymru now. You know, so yeah, I speak Welsh. We moved to Wales when I was like 2 or something. And the first school I went to was first language Welsh. So I was like learning English in Welsh, which was confusing. You know, so yeah, I speak Welsh. I don't have many opportunities to practice Welsh. Akira came from, I just loved that anime. You know, I thought it was a cool name. And I thought it sounded, and it was like, I just liked it. I like the look of it. I loved that movie. It's kind of similar to my real name in Japanese. So I was calling myself Akira. And then the Don thing came because I was in this rap group and we were on tour and we could only communicate in freestyle. You know, it was a game we were playing. You go to you pull up to the service station on the highway and you got to order your sandwich in rap, you know. And I just got real good. So I declared myself Akira the Don in the context of one of those things. And then I was Akira the Don from then forth, and never really thought about it again. In the same way that, like, names, once you got the name, you don't think about it, right? It's just a name, like Ocean Color Scene. There was an indie band called Ocean Color Scene. I used to think, when I first heard them, I thought, that's a stupid fucking name. But then after like 3 days, it's like, oh, that's just the name of the band, and you never think about it again. You know? Well,
that's Apple and iPad. Remember all the jokes about the name iPad?
Oh, yeah, because it was like a sanitary product thing, wasn't it? I forgot about that. Yeah, and I don't think about that now. Now when I hear the word iPad, I think, I think of
to go away.
banning my child from it. Yeah.
Well, there you go. And speaking of Apple, and I don't know, I'm going to guess that people have mentioned it 1,000 times to you, but I'll take a chance. Steve Jobs' commencement speech.
What about it?
Have you ever thought about doing that one, or have you ever heard it?
I think I've heard it. I think I must have heard it because I did go through a period of wormholing on Steve Jobs. And after I read the biography of Steve Jobs, which is a wonderful...
Okay, it's about 11 minutes long, an incredible speech journey about his life and learning about death and how to get beyond it.
If only he hadn't eaten all those fucking apples or whatever it was, like oranges. Like if only he'd eaten a damn steak. If only he'd eaten a blessed steak, maybe he'd still be here and iTunes wouldn't have gone to shit. Yeah, and I wouldn't be having to deal with that because iTunes is the basis of my DJ library and I'm kind of stuck with it. And it's a pain in the ass. But Steve Jobs is a person. There are a number of Steve Jobs fractions of speech in my 2-sample folder. I can say that much. I don't really like talking about things that I'm going to do that much until they happen. And particularly because like part of what I'm doing is like telling this big story. So like if you're like, in chapter 23, there's going to be a dragon. Sometimes that's cool, but like sometimes it might fuck up the experience of the dragon suddenly appearing. You know?
All right. Well, can we get a spoiler on what's coming out next that's already done?
Yeah, well, tonight, midnight, wherever you live, a song called Some Things Are In Our Control and Others Not, co-written by my latest ghostwriter, Epictetus, is dropping, and that's a banger. Tomorrow is actually the 4-year anniversary of Meaningwave. Meaningwave will have existed for exactly 4 years tomorrow. It just dawned on me. So we're going to be dropping a best-of compilation on all platforms that was chosen by the Meaningwave community. They didn't know that's what was happening at the time. I just asked people what their favorite songs were, and then I took all those responses and turned them into a compilation. The next week, a song is coming out that was ghost written by Edgar Allan Poe. I can tell you all that. And then the week after that will be the first single of the next album. I'm not going to say what that is just yet. But that one is going to be incredibly useful, very practical. It's kind of picking up where Theo left off, and it's going to show you how to transcend your suffering and your limitations. If whatever you might think is wrong with you or whatever is happening in your life, if you're lonely, if you're confused, if you're suffering, if the effects of the past years' activities and outrages have left you in any kind of state that you wish to recover from, it will show you how. So that's going to be super useful. Then we got a new Peterson album coming after that, which is the best JVP Wave record yet by far. I'm very excited about that. And that one's got like a live orchestra on it and type shit, all manner of stuff. That's going to be
okay. And by the way, you mentioned Edgar Allan Poe. Have you heard Alan Parsons?
Alan Parsons Project.
Yeah.
What's the song called?
It's a full album, Tales of Mystery and Imagination. Alan Parsons did Edgar Allan Poe.
Really? I did not know that.
Over music in 1976.
I wonder if he did this one of the poems that I've done. See, this is what I always say, like what I'm doing isn't necessarily new or anything. People, like aspects of these things have been done.
No, it's an awesome album, but it's really cool because it's kind of a precursor to some of what you're doing. And I know you've mentioned other people doing things. I mean, Baz Luhrmann.
Yeah, Baz Luhrmann did wear sunscreen, which is terrible advice, by the way. You shouldn't wear sunscreen at all. You shouldn't let anything get between you and the glory of the sun, you know? And you should sun your balls every day if you've got balls. And if you don't got balls, you should sun that too. All that stuff is very important. What's that?
I'll be pulling that clip.
That's real, though. It's very, very real. Sun your balls, by Jove, and don't be letting stuff get between you and the sun. Do you know what I need to do? That's a very good point. I need to do a new version of Wear Sunscreen, but with the message: do not wear sunscreen.
Good idea, man.
Okay, man. What was the Alan Parsons Project album? I'm just looking for it before I forget.
Tales of Mystery and Imagination.
It takes a lot of.
Really, really good. He's got the Raven on it, of course. And
I never liked the Raven for some reason, and that's all I ever knew of with Edgar Allan Poe.
Telltale Heart, Cask of Amontillado. ball of House of Ushers on it. Anyway.
No flipping way. Yeah, that's crazy. Shit, I'm so glad that I wasn't aware of this previously because it would have influenced me somehow.
Well, Alan Parsons, I mean, is a brilliant producer. I mean, he worked Dark Side of the Moon, for God's sake.
That's interesting. Well, it's interesting in that tomorrow we've got some new merch coming out, and one of the designs is a Dark Side of the Wave, and it's basically the Dark Side of the Moon, but it's a Meaningwave triangle. Boom! And,
all right, see, everything's coming full circle then. Are there any other Meaningwave artists?
No, not that I know of, because Meaningwave is, something that I'm doing, and it's a story that I'm telling. It's like a specific universe that I'm curating and creating. So there couldn't be any other Meaningwave artists. There could be people making music that is similar or inspired by, and I'm aware that there are, because people send me things. But I don't listen to them because I don't want to be influenced by anything. I'm trying to be as pure as possible with this. So I don't want anyone else's kind of versions of or whatever kind of interfering with the very pure expression that I've been engaged in for these past 4 years, which is a very interesting bloody thing.
That makes sense. Some people don't like to read their own genre when they're an author, and so I can totally understand that. Yeah,
exactly. Because it's very, very easy to pick up on other people's ideas, and that's a very useful thing, and can be a very useful thing. But also, you've got to be aware of that because it can also be to your detriment, or it can muddy what you're doing if you're not careful about it. You are always going to have, these ingredients come in. You can't stop it. So you have to be careful about what you expose yourself to, because it will come out in what you're doing.
Well, it makes perfect sense. Now, Akira, this has been fantastic. I would love to have you back sometime if you're ever wanting to come on, especially in a panel.
Yeah, of course. Love to. And thank you for having me on.
Well, thank you, sir. And